Time is not going to prevent you from focusing on the next session. But if it is a case, our moderator over here will have her way to wake you up for sure. All right. So for this afternoon session, I have my great pleasure to welcome Assistant Professor Dr. Romyen Kosaikanont, Vice President, Luang University, Thailand, as moderator for the next session, Developing Internationalization Indicators and Higher Education Institute Practices. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. A lot of supporters. So good afternoon and welcome to the third session of today under the title of Developing Internationalization Indicators and Higher Education Institution Practice. To start with, I have to extend appreciation to OHEC and also the Mahidol University, especially Nopraenue, for kindly inviting me to participate in this event. And I have to say, I'm so honored because I have listened to so many great speakers. I wouldn't imagine in my life I will meet a person who have been on the space himself and back, and who has been spending a lot of time in space for 31 days. That was really a great pleasure and honor. So I think for the last day, 1.5 days, we have heard a lot about IZN and how important it is. We also hear the perspective on the regional levels, also on the institutional levels, and on the national levels. This afternoon session, it would be another important session because we would talk about indicators and how do we measure internationalization. So with us, we have 5 speakers on this panel, but I would introduce their name and where they're coming from, and then I would give interesting information apart from what you can find in their CVs in the booklet. So the first one is Dr. Wang Libing, who is the Chief Section for Educational Innovation and Skill Development at UNESCO Bangkok, Thailand. The second of the speaker is Associate Professor Dr. Yuto Kitamura. He's from the Graduate School of Education, University of Tokyo. The third is Associate Professor Dr. Yuki Watabe from Global Learning Center from Tohoku University, Japan. The fourth speaker would be Associate Professor Dr. Nopraenue Sajjarax Dhirathiti, who is the Acting Vice President for International Relations and Corporate Communication, Mahidol University. And last but not least is Mr. Guy Perrin, who is the Regional Director, Asia, iGraduate Malaysia. What I would like to point out is that I have been reading the CVs, and I think one of the important information I got from there is that everybody is linked to everybody in the past. Let's take, for example, I'll try to wake you up. Let's take, for example, Professor Nopraenue studied at Hitotsu Bashi University, where Yuki was actually working once, right? I was studying at Sussex University, where Wang Libing was actually a visiting professor there at Sussex University. And Professor Nopraenue used to be a PhD student at Warwick University, where also Wang Libing was a visiting professor at Warwick University. And Professor Kitamura is the advisor to UNESCO, worked at the UNESCO in Paris, where Wang Libing is now working for the UNESCO. I think for that, you can look into the CV and you should enjoy that. Actually, everybody is linking with everybody at one time. So I think with that introduction, I hope I wake you up because MC was saying that I'm supposed to wake everybody up. So I will go like this. I think today is the Friday in Bangkok, and the traffic is usually very bad. And we have 2 hours for this session. We make it run organically, naturally. If you have more questions, we can probe the questions, of course. And it depends on how it goes, okay? So I wouldn't be so fixed with the time, but I would propose 20 minutes for each presentation. And there are 3 presentations. So the first one, I would like to invite Dr. Wang Libing to talk about monitoring and evaluation of the internationalization of higher education efforts of networking and development of indicators. So please welcome Wang Libing.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for staying on for the last session of this meeting. I think all of you must be very keen to really want to learn something, otherwise you left already. But I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk with you. I don't want to show any slides, because for many of our meetings, we don't need people to have slides, because if you have slides, they are reading slides. And that's not something we want, actually. But for my presentation, I just want to brief you some of our activities in the area of internationalization of higher education. As you know, we just published a policy brief on developing holistic indicators to promote internationalization of higher education in Asia and the Pacific. You can get a copy outside the room. And it's been an outcome document of the previous 2 years collaboration with Tokyo University and also other universities in the deliberation on the issue of internationalization. As you know that by nature, UNESCO is an organization that are mandated to promote internationalization of higher education. Maybe in the very beginning, the motivation is a little bit different, because bringing people together is our mandate for international understanding, for building a culture of peace. Later, we have seen so many other motivations. You can see internationalization has been related to the building of peace. Internationalization has been related to the quality of higher education provisions. And I saw that a lot of argument has been shared through presentations. As the case in Thailand, the government see internationalization as a way to mobilize more quality higher education resources from abroad. And also by collaborating with other institutions in other countries, it's also an opportunity for us to increase our capacity, and also a lot of different motivations we can see. But the most recent motivation is clearly related to the recruitment of higher education students. As we can see in many of the countries, in Japan, Korea, they are facing the challenge of aging society. The university age population is declining, and they are no longer be able to maintain their size unless they can recruit more international students. But from other perspectives, even from trade perspectives, I think higher education also is increasingly regarded as a kind of industry. It's greener than tourism, because sometimes tourism can produce pollutions, very crowded streets, and it's producing many, many negative things, actually, with the, flooding of all the tourists. Higher education is actually very, very green industry, because once a student is studying in your country, they are naturally close to your country. They would be promoting your country. I was educated not long in England. I'm naturally interested in everything happened in University of Sussex, in University of Warwick. I was always even, getting to the web page. So once you are studied here, you are a lifetime alumni to these universities, and it's naturally, by culture, you are closer to. So I think the motivation is quite clear that even as an industry, although many of people don't like commercializing higher education, and the UNESCO's position is just treat this as a public goods. But higher education is increasingly becoming a business. In Australia, it's a big business, maybe just only next to tourism, so this is I think should be the motivation. Another thing is that nowadays countries are not only competing for best brains, but also competing for young people. And if you can provide higher education and immigration connection, then you are in a better position to be benefiting from the so-called brain gain. Of course, for us, we would like, don't want developing countries to suffer from brain drain. We are more in favor of brain circulation, you know, these kind of things. But thinking of the different levels of development in higher education, it's also a kind of, you know, dynamics. You know, some countries, they are losing people, young people, talented people. But some countries, they are getting. I was once joking with people that why refugee issues in Europe was very generously treated. And one of the reasons is that countries like Germany, they would take refugees as a kind of labor, young labor forces, right? That's very understandable, right? Why? People very keen to taking refugees from Syria, from other war-affected areas. So I would say that the motivations are all different. But one thing is also quite common, that internationalization is very good for enhancing the quality of higher education provisions. So this is what we believed as it. Also, as you know, for UNESCO, we are promoting regional conventions for the recognition of higher education qualifications. We have a so-called second generation of the convention, which is called the Tokyo Convention. We have 6 ratifications, including all the major receiving countries, like Australia, like China, like Japan, Korea, and New Zealand. We also have a ratification from the Holy See. So we had a very successful meeting in Korea in October. And we decided that the recognition issue itself is not that important. The most important thing is to link recognition with mobility and also quality assurance. So this is what we are promoting. And I think internationalization also very much to do with mobility of students, professionals, and etc. So this is something, you know, as a background. I would say also that internationalization is not new, actually. It started at very early years. We only use a new term called internationalization. If you are in the area of comparative education, you will know that in early years, there's a movement of people, occasional exchange of professionals. They are recording what they have seen in the countries when they are traveling to other countries. The purpose is to have some cultural borrowing. And even some visits or exchange is only just because of the curiosity. Just want to know what happened in other territory. So this kind of early exchange is also, I think it's the beginning of the internationalization. And later you can see the rise of the nation state, the concept of nation state. And the rise of the Western superpowers with the establishment of national higher education systems. Then we can see the whole colonization process by the Western powers that brought to other territories their systems. Like what we can see, British model, you saw the chief of the university, vice chancellor. Vice chancellor is not vice president. Vice chancellor is president. It's being misunderstood in many countries. Vice chancellor, pro-vice chancellor is the vice president, right? So this is kind of tradition. I can immediately tell that in Malaysia, you always say VC. VC is president. But if you go to Indonesia, you would call their rector, right? Rector is a continental model. It's all brought by strong connection with their former colonized. So this is the kind of movement of systems. And internationalization happened in this way. But after that, we also saw decolonization process with specific countries to be moving from traditions to transformations, right? So we can see what happened in India, because basically they are British model, but they are moving away a little bit from British model. But in their DNA, it's British, right? So this kind of globalization, internationalizing happened. And all after that, we have seen a lot of national efforts to promote transparencies, compatibility, and comparability among different systems in the region. And UNESCO's job is really to bring countries together. We have seen what happened in Europe. They have finished the so-called Bologna process of harmonizing higher education systems. You have seen common higher education area, European higher education area. I was dreaming of having the same process in Asia and the Pacific, but it's not that easy. And I said many times in my lifetime, I cannot see it happen, maybe. But for UNESCO, we are start some foundational work. We would like to empower the member states to establish very robust systems. So regional harmonization is really the way forward. And this is what we can see in terms of internationalization. So we can see different levels of internationalization. The highest can be seen as harmonization at a regional level, as we have seen, from the European Union. In this context, I would like to say that in this policy brief, we take stock of all the comments and the best practices from member states, and we commissioned a consultant to do this, and followed by peer review process. So we came up with a kind of holistic indicators to measure internationalization of higher education. As you can see, at least at a system level, we need to look at these domains, which is mobility for teaching and learning, which is students' mobility at system level. UNESCO Institute for Statistics, every year they are receiving data, Luang, is I'm right, receiving data on the inbound and outbound students. And I don't know the accuracy of the data because sometimes it's conflicting with other data provided by the same government. But it's really a matter of data collection and inbound and outbound. But I'm not sure if we should also collect some data about the mobility of programs, mobility of institutions, mobility of professionals. For UNESCO, the term is quite clear, cross-border higher education, including mobility of students, professionals, institutions, programs. It's not like a WTO gates, 4 modes of delivery, cross-border supply, commercial presence, and nature, movement of nature persons, assumption abroad. This is the WTO, General Agreement on Service, this terminology. For UNESCO, we published a joint guideline with OECD about the quality assurance of cross-border higher education. So this should be something, we need to think of this. If the government need to introduce some incentive policies or capacity building measures to empower our universities to recruit more students, international students, and also to be collaborating with other international universities on joint degree program or campus, franchise campus, all these kind of things. I think in this case, Malaysia is very open. They are inviting foreign universities to establish campus in Malaysia. We also see a lot in China, but I don't know if there's any in Japan. And also, many of the countries are thinking of, setting up a campus in other countries. So movement of institutions is also a kind of, I think research collaboration is also very important. International research money, and now the usual measure of citation, number of citations, right? I used to read an article which is written by Professor Philip Alterbach about the tyranny of the citations. We are now overusing the citation index. It's not good for the whole profession. And the UNESCO is not in favor of ranking. It's very attractive, eye-catching, but theoretically or methodologically, it's not valid. Because you can adjust the indicators to get what you want, right? For example, if I want to be ranked first, I said, oh, the biggest indicator should be this guy should be, family name should be Wang. Then I got the highest rank, right? It's quite manipulating. For UNESCO, we never appreciate this kind of activities. And I think also research collaboration and also the evaluation of research sciences should be based, traditional way is peer review. But we are also calling for more use of consumers evaluation rather than peer review. Because peer cannot see good with each other, right? They cannot appreciate each other. You are all the vendors, you are all the providers of the services. And the peer review can be sometimes misused by scholars grouping together, holding together, you know, I support you, you support me, right? I used to be a professor, I know all the things. So maybe more use of vendors, or and the users evaluation is also important. Policies, national government should also have policies. I think the new one from us is alignment with international norms and practices. For example, if a country ratified Tokyo Convention, it's being part of your internationalization of higher education, right? We produce these kind of documents. And I think it's also a kind of consensus, you know, international normative tools, although this level is very lower, rather than convention level. So this is the kind of things. And also, I would like also universities, countries to really align their policies in favor of sustainable development, global citizenship, education, you know, all these overarching values and principles. This is also part of the internationalization level. And also management, governance styles, you know, should be bottom up, more participatory, all these kind of very, very overarching principles. I think at the institutional level it's quite similar, but teaching, research, social service, and also networking. But I would also like to mention that MOU number is not that real. I mean, sometimes MOUs are only on paper, only on paper. When there's a change of leadership, it's just a paper. And there's no ownership at the faculty level. So maybe bottom-up approach is more effective. I know some president, the vice chancellor is sign MOU easily with this university, happy traveling with this and that, but no implementation. So I think this is something, you know, I hope I cannot elaborate on this. Could you just please take a look at this? Then finally, I will say data sharing and the data analysis is also important. I used to be a professor. I want to ask some data from some, for example, division of teaching and learning. They said, no, why should I give it to you? You should get approval from the president or vice president. Then I know some universities, they prepare different versions of data for different purposes. If you want to use this, or this is the data. Or if you want to do this, or this is the data. So we are talking with Tokyo University and also other partner universities. If we are launching a new project to do the biannual report on internationalization of higher education, we would like to invite universities who promise to share data, real data with us. Otherwise, you are not, I don't think we can work with you on this. At the national level, it's also not that easy. So the data sharing and the data collection mechanism is really very important. And I believe that each university is producing big data every day. Every day, and it's been, hided, it's not being open for research, easily. So in this regard, I really admire economists. They can be provided with some common data, which is very valid. They can really make their own analysis and judgment based on the same unemployment rate, some index, right? So I think for education also, we need data. Otherwise, we are quite soft. Educational studies are not recognized as a very scientific field of study, and as you are not just, it's just a kind of soft science. And I think I do not have much time, and I hope that time is up. So maybe hope I can answer questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wang Libing, for your presentation. And I think what we can hear from UNESCO is that UNESCO has the motivation, and yesterday we also hear this, to do the internationalization for the peace building, for enhancing quality of higher education, and also to address the new emerging issues on the global levels. At the same time, their mandate is to create the internationalization indicators that would help the policymaker to come up with the policy formation in terms of capacity buildings and many more. And he leaves the last note, that is data collection, data sharing, and also data analysis is very, very important. So with that, I think we have the second presentations from Associate Professor Dr. Kitamura, who are the researcher himself. So he can give us more about the points that Dr. Wang has left us. Please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kitamura, and thank you very much for, first of all, I'd like to express our sincere appreciation to the organizers for giving us this precious opportunity. And this, our presentation, I do presentation in collaboration with my colleague, Dr. Watabe, and we will be more focusing on the development of indicators. As Dr. Libing Wang explained, it's very important to monitor and evaluate the progress of internationalization of higher education, particularly in the context of Asia and the Pacific, which is very dynamically changing today. And he mentioned three keywords like transparency, comparability, and accountability. In order to assure those three, I think we need good data, also he mentioned. And we've been closely working with UNESCO Bangkok for the last couple of years to try to develop a set of indicators which can be a good ground or foundation for our new idea, which also he mentioned, of the publishing a periodical report to review the conditions and the situations of internationalization of higher education in the regions. So we have a big, big dream and motivation to do that kind of work. But in order to do that, we have to be very solid scientifically as well. So I would like to explain about why we need such indicators to be much more solid scientifically. So I'm going to skip the first slide because these are the issues already discussed a lot during the last 1.5 days. And we have a lot of efforts to try to harmonize the different higher education systems in the regions in order to make more smoother mobility of the students, researchers, and programs, and so on and so forth. However, we have some problems. I mean, there is no big picture to understand what is actually happening in the regions. Although there have been several parallel efforts to try to support people to move around, for instance. This is one of the examples of the sub-regional efforts to promote the more internationalization of higher education. It's called ASEAN +3 Working Group on Mobility and Quality Assurance of Higher Education, which was established in 2012 by the education ministers of the ASEAN plus China, Korea, and Japan. And I have been representing Japanese government in this working group to discuss with my colleagues from other countries to develop the guidelines to make sure that the higher education system assures their qualities Also, for instance, we have developed the guidelines for the credit transfers, the way, how the students can more easily transfer their credits back to their own home after their study abroad. This is just one example. There are many other efforts, as you are quite aware, like ASEAN University Network, Female Lighthead, AIMS programs, and so on and so forth, which we have already had so many last 1.5 days. And there are, however, the issues we are facing currently. This slide and next slide are the results of the study I have been conducting with my colleague, Professor James Williams of the George Washington University. He's also present here. And we have looked at a number of literatures and reports which explain the situations of internationalization of the regions. And we have identified these issues. There are a lot of data, but much of the data are focusing on the mobility aspects, but doesn't really show what is actually happening on campus, what sort of teaching and learning taking place, what are the curriculum, and so on and so forth. So as next slide shows, for instance, publicly available indicators are very much focusing on student mobility. You see very, very little about other aspects. Although the literatures are not always discussing about student mobility. In fact, as the graph on the right hand shows, the literatures discuss various dimensions of the internationalization of higher education in Asia and Pacific. However, when you focus on the data, most of the discussions are only depending on the data relating to the student mobility. So we see here is a lot of discrepancy in terms of the availability of the data. So that's why we really need efforts to collect more solid data to really understand what is happening in the regions. So now I would like to invite my colleague, Professor Watabe, to explain one of such efforts to develop, to identify what sort of indicators we really need. So I'd like to invite.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Kitamura. My part of the presentation is to share findings of our research project on internationalization indicator for higher education institutions. So with a group of researchers, Professor Ota, who presented yesterday, I think he's here today too, and I have conducted 3 surveys aiming to develop systemic set of indicators for measuring university internationalization performance. Oh, sorry. The purpose of this presentation is to examine similarities and difference in the goals, strategy, indicator, and evaluation method internationalized university among Oceania, South and Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Japan. So as I mentioned, we conducted 3 surveys so far. So in the first round survey, we asked 229 Japanese universities about the effectiveness of the 152 indicators to assess internationalization of university. Based on the first analysis, we identified 53 indicators regarded most effective. Then in the second round of survey, we asked 37 universities about the importance of the selected 53 indicators. So these 37 universities was selected for top global university project, which has been carried by Japanese government since 2014. So there's 2 types of the programs. 13 universities was selected as a top type. We call the type A here. So they are a top leading institution aiming to be in the top 100 universities in the world ranking. Then rest of 24 universities, they are selected as a type B, and those institutions are aiming to implement more innovative internationalization effort. So after we have done 2 surveys in Japan, we extended our research to in Asia. So that's the 3rd survey. So this time we asked academic administrative staff about the same, the importance of this 53 internationalization indicators. So here is the responses. So as you see, the one of the survey we have done in Asia, so we have 242 responses, and 42% the South and Southeast Asia, 45% East Asia, 12% is Oceania. Then in terms of Japan, I'm focusing on only the 2nd survey, so which is targeted top global university. Here's the response by question categories. So as I mentioned in our survey, there is 4 things we asked: internationalization strategy, internationalization goals, and the indicator to evaluate internationalization, then also evaluation method. So now let me move to the findings. The first item is the goal of internationalization. So to assess internationalization, each university needs to know why our institution is internationalizing our campus, which including education, research, and also service and administrative system. So in the survey, we asked to choose all applicable responses with regard to the goal of the internationalization at their university, and rank them in descending order of the priority. So as you see, there's 5 goals here. So for analysis, weight was assigned to each responses based on their rank value. If a response is a first rank, so 5 points was assigned. If the response is a second rank, 4 points was assigned, and so on. Then the total score of each goal were calculated and divided by the total number of the responses. So the table shows the final score. So across 3 Asian regions and Japan, 2 educational goals are priority, which is A, to enhance the quality of education, and C, to prepare students to effectively for life and work in the intercultural and globalizing world. So if you see South and Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Japan, education quality was ranked first. Then second one, student preparation. However, in Oceania, student preparation was first rank. Then D, to enhance international reputation visibility, was ranked second. Then as I mentioned, in the case of Japan, there is 2 types of global university. So here's some difference in the goals. So sorry, so here. So in the top type, so my apology, I'm skipping. Here's the goal. So the top, the quality of education was ranked first in both types. However, the second one, in the top type, the quality of research is ranked second. However, type B and the preparation of the student was a second. Here's some difference, depends on the type of the institution. Now I would like to move to the strategy. So strategies to achieve the internationalization goal, each university needs to define what internationalization strategy university is taking. So we asked to choose all applicable responses with regard to the strategy at their university and rank them in descending order of the priority. So there's 4 strategy. So the weight was assigned to each response is based on their rank value. if a response is the first rank, the 4 point was assigned, and if response is the second rank, 3 point was assigned, so on. Then the total score of each strategy was calculated, divided by the total number of responses. So the table shows the final scores. Then as you see, across all 3 regions and Japan, B, cooperation and networking, strengthening the international institutional profile was most prioritized. Then as you see, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Japan, the A, competition and aiming for the achievement of world-class university status was the second. Then third, the C, internationalization as a means of improving their profile within a country to recruit good domestic students. So that was the third. So Australia has a slightly different picture. And then first strategy, most prioritized strategy is the same. But second one is D, internationalization for survival. Recruiting an international student is essential for institutional survival or for maintaining institutional competitiveness. That was the second. Then the third one was competition. Then focusing on Japan again, since there is a 2 types of institution, and a type A, which is try to aiming the top 100, and this type, and actually A, competition was highly prioritized. Then next one is a cooperation and networking. However, type B, B, cooperation networking is the first, then and C, internationalization means of providing institutional profile within a country was the second. So there is a difference. Now let me move to the indicator, which is the main topic today. So indicators are measures to assess to what extent the internationalization goals and objectives are met. So we asked to choose one of the responses about the importance of each evaluation indicator. We use 3 scales, 3 and extremely important, 2 important, and 1 somewhat important. Then in the survey, extremely important could not be selected more than half of the 53 indicator. So then the table this table shows the mean of importance by indicator categories. So here is the 8 category of the indicator. Then as you see, C, administration indicator category were most important across the all region and Japan. So, but here is some differences. In Oceania, the research indicator category was also most important. Then the South and the Southeast Asia and promotion and marketing categories was also most important. Then East Asia, promotion and the marketing indicator category and the funding and the finance are also most important. The Japan has a slightly different picture, so student category considered important. But again, there is a difference between the 2 university types. Then type A, actually research was the most important category. Then type B, student is more important. So finally, I would like to, sorry, there is another one. So I just mentioned the indicator category, but this one is related to individual indicator. So I also examined what individual indicator was considered commonly important across the 3 regions and Japan. So I ranked 53 indicator by means, identified the top 30 indicator in each region and Japan. Then I compared, then there's a 13 indicator commonly ranked in the top 30, 3 Asian region and Japan. Then as you see, about half of the indicator was actually this one colored blue. So those are indicator refers to institutional policy and system promoter internationalization. It means that those indicators more include institutional strategy and the financial planning and also responsibility assignment of internationalization activities and the implementation of the quality assurance system. Then another half, the indicators refer to the student mobility. But majority of them actually are indicators related to receiving international student. So this is the most important indicator to regard it. Then another one also, there are all indicators which commonly regarded less important across all regions and Japan. So here's the 6 indicators that are not ranked in the top 30, either any region or Japan. Then, so then this colored one is all indicator related for faculty and also administrative staff member. So those indicators considered less important. Finally, the last item is evaluation method. So we asked what type of institutional internationalization evaluation they would like to employ. They are asked to select at least 3 responses and rank them. So weight was assigned to each response based on their rank values. If it's the first rank, 3 points, then second rank is 2 points, and the third rank was 1 point. Then the total score of each evaluation method was calculated. So this table shows the final score and also the number of responses. So there are 9 evaluation methods. Then the last one is no plan to conduct institutional evaluation. So those evaluations actually categorize 3 types. And the first one is a self-evaluation. Then second one is a mutual evaluation, which means you want to evaluate your own institution with a partner institution. Then finally, this one is evaluation by the third party. So as you see, self-evaluation is the most popular one across the whole region and Japan. However, there is some difference. And in the case of Oceania, so they want to do self-evaluation, but through the benchmarking with a domestic institution. Then Southeast Asia, East Asia is self-evaluation according to the institutional needs. Then in the case of Japan, the type A, so they want to do self-evaluation through benchmarking with institution abroad. However, type B, they want to do the benchmarking according to institutional needs. So there's some difference here. So this table shows a summary of the comparative analysis I have explained. So I would like to conclude my presentation with a very brief summary here, focusing on the internationalization indicator. Across 3 Asian regions and Japan, administrative indicator as a strategy, responsibility assignment, and the implementation of the quality assurance system were regarded most important. But in East Asia and Japan, indicator related to the financial stability for internationalization was also considered most important. In Oceania, indicator for receiving international students and the research indicator were also regarded most important as a survival strategy, and also the goal of internationalization, reputation, and visibility were prioritized. Then in South and Southeast Asia, as well as East Asia, indicators for recruiting and receiving international students were also regarded most important. Finally, in Japan, the indicator regarded most important actually reflect evaluation indicator of top global university project. So regarding a type A, research indicators and also student indicators such as proportion of international student to the domestic student and the student studying abroad was considered most important. Then in a type B, student indicator and also indicator related to academic services. So that was considered most important. So thank you for your attention. I hope our research finding can be the good resource for our session discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Kitamura and also Professor Watabe. I think we can agree that this is a great effort that has been done. The research team has been trying to compare the indicators and also the evaluation methods that on the internationalization. But we can also see, as she has already concluded, that there are some differences in these indicators and how people put weight on these indicators, how they see importance or not so important. But next, I think we can hear more on the institutional level. We will hear the example of Mahidol University, who has been trying to implement some of the indicators. So let's hear it from Professor Nopraenue, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think my job here today is to give you an example at the institutional level of what both of the first two speakers have been doing at UNESCO and also the research team from the Japanese government, Tokyo and Hitotsubashi, Waseda, and some other institutions in Japan. So we have been involving in this attempt to identify the common indicators for internationalization for 3 years already, I think. And before I took up this job, I was wondering, first thing, how I, as a researcher at that time, how I would be able to collect these data and how I would be able to make use of it. So 15 months ago, I took the job as the Vice President for International Relations here at Mahidol University. So it was an opportune time for me to learn how to make use of it. And as a university administrator, I believe that we have a lot of university administrators here, and we have lots of colleagues who are researchers focusing on internationalization as well. I think whenever we have to make a decision on resources, human resources or funding resources, scholarship or whatever, we have to really think how we are going to make use of those limited resources most efficiently. So in the areas of internationalization, when I took the job, I asked this question. I asked what kind of internationalization in Mahidol University I would like to focus on. And I think these are just a few things that we have to think about. I believe that our colleagues here might have got more than this, but these are just a few questions I asked myself, whether internationalization would be something to just ranking, or we are going to create the so-called culture of internationalization like Nico just mentioned this morning. Are we going to come up with internationalization policy at the institutional level using the supply side, what we would like to have at the university as university administrators, or you would listen to what your stakeholders want, okay? Which segmentation you are going to answer to, your local native Thais or your natives, respective local students, or are you going to promote internationalization for international students? Are you going to have internationalization at home, or are you going to have internationalization abroad? So these are just the simple questions I believe that my colleagues everywhere, probably you already asked the same question. Why am I asking, why did I ask myself those questions? Because within the limited resources that you have got within your institutions, you have to make sure that you align the strategies correctly in terms of internationalization. So because we already agreed, internationalization is very costly. It doesn't come cheap at all, okay? No matter how clever you are, you still need lots of financial support from your institution. So after asking myself those questions, we came up among the team and also among the major part of the community that we have to identify that internationalization will not be a standalone portfolio. It is a facilitation to every core business of the university. So for Mahidol University, definitely the first step would be how we are going to make ourselves more visible through internationalization, how we are going to improve quality of research, education, and student services through internationalization. Like Libing mentioned earlier, that internationalization should not be an end in itself. It should be the mean to any end, okay? We are identifying that internationalization should be enhancing our aspiration to be world-class education and world-class research institute. Definitely the major portion of internationalization in many higher education institutions nowadays is student mobility. We cannot forget about that. But as you will see later on, there will be more to the definition of mobility. Then internationalization could be a source of income, revenue-generated activity. So it really depends on what you look at internationalization within your institutions and how you are going to measure it. Another question I asked myself 15 months ago when I took this job was how I am going to convince the community, the Mahidol University community, to follow me. And how I am going to convince all deans and also my own colleagues within the administrative team to give us more budget. Okay, so I really have to come up with something, especially the output, deliverables, and how you are going to measure it, how you are going to tell them that you have done something. So internationalization indicators come into play, not because I took the job. I am particularly interested in this issue for quite a long time. I have been interested in this for quite a long time. Well, I am always telling myself I was a product of internationalization. I was at the age, at the era where there was only one outbound scholarship that we had to compete for. Now our students compete not to go. I was in the era where I had to compete to go out, because each year there was only one scholarship, 28 years ago when I was a bachelor's degree student. Now I'm telling you my age. Okay, so what we are doing at Mahidol University in relations to this development of internationalization indicators, along with UNESCO and also from colleagues from Japan and some other countries. I'm not saying Mahidol University is a guinea pig. It is very fortunate that most of our indicators that we have been collecting at the university could be qualified as the indicators that came up by the impartiality of UNESCO, and also some of those indicators are overlapping with the research done by Kitamura sensei's team. Okay, let's take a look then. These are the internationalization domains proposed by the UNESCO, this one. And they have given us common ideas, common indicators, both for the system level, at the national level, if you would like to take a look, and also at the institutional level. So for me, I'm going to take a look in each domains and the sub-indicators that we have been collecting in terms of data and in terms of numbers, and see what Mahidol University is lacking and what we have done more, okay? And I think we pretty much agreed within the group that these are not definite indicators. It means that it can be developed, it can be added, it can be increased more in terms of the types of indicators as the years gone by. So let's take a look at the first domain suggested by UNESCO. I believe that some of these indicators, the national governments in many countries have already developed these indicators already. So the first one, domain one, is governance and leadership indicators, including 5 main indicators. I think Mahidol University have got these numbers, have got these collection of data, including institutional strategies on internationalization. Like I said, I just told you where I came from in terms of internationalization strategies. Type of services provided at home and abroad. It could be both academic and non-academic activities. Capacity building for academic and supporting staff, what you have within your institutions to support your staff. Trainings, do you have those kind of training programs for your staff, both for supporting and also academic staff? Professional positions for staff position relating to internationalization, not only in the international relations division, but do you have what kind of professional positions relating to the promotion of internationalization within your institution? Proportion of expenditure devoting to internationalization would be able to, you would be really, it would be really easy to find under the planning and budgeting system. I don't put the number, and I will tell you later why I don't really put the number. This is just to show you that all of these indicators, how many Mahidol University would be able to collect the data. The second one, domain 2, research. For research, definitely co-authored publication. Most of the university who are participating in ranking system, you really have to submit this data, the co-authored publication. Well, research funding, definitely, especially from foreign sources. Some university might already have categories of funding sources. Internal funding sources or external funding sources. Proportion of collaborative research projects with foreign institutions in the total number of research projects. So I think these can be found in your research division within the university. At Mahidol University, these data are at research division. The number of language used in the dissemination of research finding, this one I put it in blue because we don't have this data yet. And I think it's more applicable to countries where you publish your research in many languages, like Malaysia, for example, in local Malay, English, and what else? I don't know, maybe not Malaysia, I'm not sure. Maybe Chinese, yes.
In case of Luang.
Yes, yeah, so I think this one might be practical for those countries or those system, those higher education system, which are very plural, the pluralist system. The ones I put it in red are those we collected but do not appear in the common indicators, including co-patented innovation, and also the number of joint unit lab center of excellence or research program. The joint unit ones, well, when you would like to collect any data, you have to come up with a definition and why you have to use this data. Because for me, I put this as one of the indicator that I'm counting as deliverables, because I would like to step up international relations within the institutions, that it has to go beyond just routine collaboration. So for the joint units, we have got a very concrete collaboration by having our partners coming in and have physical presence within the universities. And it has been used as a stepping stone to upgrade international relations within those faculties and institutes. So these two with red are those which were not mentioned within the common indicators. Domain 3, the institutional networks, these are just the ticking or the list of connections or connectivity you are having with international counterparts, including, I think everybody has got the MOU numbers. These are the common things. The multilateral platform, mostly institutional collaboration would be bilateral, right? The majority of the connectivity, the majority of the connection. But we discussed somehow on Wednesday with a group of with a working group that multilateral platforms are also important that you have to really identify. And I think this one comes into play, especially under the umbrella of the national government, like Director Lakana mentioned yesterday in the afternoon, that one of the priorities of the OHEC was to promote a multilateral platform for internationalization. And I think this platform, multilateral platform, would be the ones that the government should be focusing on as well. Professional platform, these are the discipline-based platform. It can be with international organization, or it can be any professional organizations that you're working with. Are you collecting these numbers within your institutions? How you will be able to come up with the information regarding specific platforms that your faculties or your institutes are working with. Academic platform, it can be open platform like international academic exhibitions or whatever that you could be in connection with. Another one, the last one, would be the accreditation platform, which accreditation or quality assurance or qualifications framework platform, where you use it as a starting point or as a certification of your quality. I think these are the things that you really have to collect as internationalization indicators. Domain 4, I put it in blue from the start at the level of domain, because these are the things that we haven't collected yet. Okay, at Mahidol University, we don't have these numbers. And I'm grateful because I already mentioned with the chair, with Madam Chair, that sometimes we use these indicators as a guideline of what we should be achieving. Sometimes we use it as deliverables, as a proof of our deliverables. Okay, so it depends on your context. You are going to use this as a guideline, as like the starting point. If you don't know where to go, you can mix and match. You can pick and choose, from my point of view. So definitely social engagement would be the things that I have to put some budgets in the pipeline and ask our kind faculty members to push forward. It will not be me, definitely. It will be someone else who are doing the job. So, but I have to make sure that these indicators, this output comes with the budget, okay? So these are the two that were suggested by the UNESCO. Number of community projects involving foreign cultures, and also maybe the numbers of activities which include a discussion of engagement activities abroad. I think these are not too difficult to work with. Number 5, domain number 5 is the mobility for teaching and learning. The first one will be involving students. These are the classic basic indicators that I believe that everybody is really familiar with, right? Inbound students, outbound students, full-time international students. Libing mentioned earlier in his talk that apart from outbound, inbound students, we may have to think about some others as well. So at Mahidol University, we are collecting internship students, the number of internship students, fellows, and also residents, because we have lots of faculties involving in life science and medicine. For staff, definitely staff with international degree, we rely on the information from the Human Resource Division. full-time international staff, you have to collect these numbers for ranking domestic international staff ratio. Short-term outbound faculties, you have some support for them for their participations in other countries or in other institutions or not. You're promoting them to make friends with others or not. So these are the indicators that we have been collecting. The red one would be the numbers on short-term visiting professors and adjunct professors. Okay. Work attachment for supporting staff, because when you talk about the culture of internationalization, you cannot have only international student or international faculty members who are very well versed in international arena. You need supporting staff who are very well trained for internationalization as well. So these are the indicators being tagged along with activities that we have got within the university. The third one under mobility domain would be curriculum. Okay, number of international programs. The programs provided by your own universities, how many international programs you have got. A number of collaborative programs with foreign partners in terms of double degree, joint degree, co-total program. The number of online international programs. Some university, I believe that you have departed toward working effectively using online learning and teaching, but maybe is in your language is not open for international public. So these data you really have to collect as well, so that you know where you are in terms of international program, the online international program. The number of programs with international focus we haven't collected yet. These are the new indicators that we have to consider whether we would be able to collect or not. I have to do some research within the university and see how we are going to identify what would be the program with international focus. We have to really come up with a definition as well. Another one that we haven't really collected yet is the inclusion of global citizenship and other SDG goals in the academic programs. This is in line with what I think Ji-hye mentioned yesterday about the SDG goal number 4 plus the global citizenship, which will be the headlines for international education in the years to come. So these will be another one that we are going to see if we can talk through to the community within Mahidol University to include global citizenship into their respective programs. The 6th one in red, the international branch campus, I think some of us here mentioned about this as well, whether if you would like to promote internationalization abroad. Branch campus might be one of the things that you have to consider, like Malaysia has shown us on Wednesday, in our separate meeting, that they are moving from internationalization at home to internationalization abroad by having branch campuses with foreign countries. Okay, actually I put satellite campus here because there was one. Yeah, time's up. Can I take 5 more minutes from Guy? Okay.
Maybe not
my
from Guy,
colleagues. From everyone. Okay, 5 more minutes. Okay, this satellite campus, we call it. Probably later on, our former vice president here, he's sitting here with us today as well. He was the originator of this satellite campus, so he might be able to elaborate more. We call it satellite campus because it is not a branch campus. It's not a physical campus, but it's like a delivery of teaching and learning in another country. Well, I don't know why he came up with this word, satellite campus. He might be able to tell us more later on. Okay. The last domain number 6, support of internationalization. How many of scholarships are available for international students, for your inbound students? And how many of scholarships or financial support you are having for your local students to go abroad? So these are very simple numbers. An extra mile that we are doing for our students are not only numbers. the extra mile that we are trying to do at the university is we are trying to collect their satisfaction rate as well. So we started this, again, thanks to the previous vice president. He has been in the talk with Guy, who will be elaborating more about what we mean by service satisfaction survey. Because I think that the numbers alone could satisfy the community somehow. But when you talk about improving your service, you really have to ask the stakeholder. You really have to ask the students. So these are the extra mile that we have been doing at the postgraduate level. 3 years ago, I was at the Faculty of Graduate Studies, and we did that under the guidance of the previous vice president. We talked about how we are going to do the survey, how to check whether at the program level, you have to really at least benchmark with each other. If you provide programs in pharmacology, why pharmacology offered in the Faculty of Pharmacy is doing much better than pharmacology provided by some other faculties. Those are the origin. Those are the starting point that we thought at that time that we have to know the service satisfaction survey, and we have to know the numbers of the international student learning experience. So I'm going to hand over to Guy to talk more about how we evaluate and how to assess this. But before giving this floor to Guy, I mentioned this, we discussed with Madam Chair earlier, that these indicators have not been benchmarked yet. You just do the ticking whether you have it or you don't have it, okay? The next step that I think both Libing and also Kitamura Sensei and also the team would like to see more is how we are going to benchmark it. Because the data alone, if you keep it to yourself, it doesn't worth any attempt in collecting it at all. So you have to really benchmark it with maybe some other institutions or maybe, I don't know, some other countries to know where you are at. It's not for competition, but it's just to know where you are heading and where other people are heading. So sometimes, like Einstein said, knowledge is not knowledge in itself, but is something which is value, added value. So you really have to share the knowledge with others. So these data collection doesn't do me any good except getting more budget. But these data collection will be a lot useful for us all if we share it among our community of higher education institutions. So Guy, please take over, please.
Great, it's an honour to be here at the inaugural IZNHEP. Thanks to Mahidol and all the organisers for allowing me to share a platform with them. I've only got about 10 to 15 minutes to go through a couple of tools and processes that we've developed to help you benchmark both the student experience and also the level of internationalization within your institution. Just some reflections on some of the previous speakers, which I've obviously enjoyed very much, and Dr. Salmi has already mentioned about perhaps the importance of benchmarking over rankings, which rankings can be a bit of a beauty contest, but benchmarking, particularly if you choose the right institutions to benchmark with or institutions that you see as your peers, is perhaps more important. And I'm going to explain the student barometer that we've been working with Mahidol and other institutions around the world in terms of making that benchmark comparison. I very much enjoyed Professor Ota's critique of Japanese internationalization policies, the plethora of KPIs that they've created, and I think often the KPIs are easy to count and easy to measure, but you know what in reality is the impact or the output for the students. So perhaps I can put the student voice back into the conversation and perhaps what's been missing and their views on internationalization. Of course, they're not the only views that are important, but they are our key stakeholder, so we should certainly take their views into account, and also reflecting on what Professor Tan spoke of earlier today in terms of internationalization and students' views of internationalization being a state of mind and an attitude that we can, of course, develop as well. So I'm going to just explain briefly who we are as an organization. I'll explain the student barometer, which benchmarks the student experience. We'll look at a little bit of data from Mahidol. And also I want to explain a new tool that we've developed called the Global Education Profiler, which we developed in collaboration with the University of Warwick, looking at how internationalized is your university. So first of all, quick bit of background about iGraduate. We're an education research company. We've been working since 2005 in terms of benchmarking the student experience. Over 3 million students in terms of the feedback we've got. So we've got an enormous data set in terms of their reflections on the student experience, and a number of you here will be familiar with our work and indeed our partners with us. We work across 33 countries. I'm based in Malaysia, so I work with Malaysian institutions, Professor Norsar there, and also beginning now to work in Thailand as well. So how do we define the student experience? And these are the kind of measures that we're using to benchmark across the globe. It's not rocket science here, obviously. It's a list of criteria that we use in terms of benchmarking. Some of these directly related to internationalization, whether it's multiculturalism, etc. We look at the learning, we look at the living, we look at the support services that Professor Nopraenue has already mentioned in terms of the support services that you hopefully have in place to assist your international students. And we also look at the arrival. We have quite a large section on arrival. We think it's very important. Those first few days for both domestic and international students can colour your impression of an institution. So that's the sort of criteria that we use. And when we look at the sort of global levels of satisfaction with students with these kind of criteria, you can see the range. At the bottom you can see all the different facets of the learning experience and all the questions we ask. And I've just highlighted a couple in terms of those items that perhaps relate to the topic that we're talking about today. You can see 91% in terms of multicultural, so students who are happy that they are learning from other cultures while they're during their university experience. And all the way down, right at the bottom, and this is particularly true for international students. International students demand a work experience. They want work experience while they are studying. The problem, of course, is that in various countries, the regulations are such that they cannot get the same experience that domestic students are allowed. So that's the learning satisfaction. We also look at student well-being, an increasingly important issue. Again, important to benchmark this. This is an example. You can see the Malaysian flag in the top right. So these are all Malaysian institutions. This is including including UTM, including UTP. We can get an idea of international students. And we have a sort of proxy for integration. So we're looking at making friends from this country, i.e. Malaysia in this case, other friends, making friends from other nationalities, safety, which is one of the key factors for international students, very, very important, and then overall happiness, happiness being very different from satisfaction. It's a kind of new question for us. I am happy with my life at the institution. And you can see Malaysia is an incredibly friendly country for international students. International students find it very easy to make friends with Malaysians. So that's a positive result there for Malaysia. And just how do we actually benchmark in terms of the data? And I'm going to show you Mahidol's data in a minute. But this is an example of University of Oxford. University of Oxford publicise the data on their website. So they're confident enough to publicise the data. It's confidential data, but Oxford are confident enough that they can publicise it. So here you can see the satisfaction rates for Oxford University in terms of these are the arrival indices that I mentioned earlier. And then Oxford want to benchmark themselves against the global picture, so they get a sense of where they stand globally. They also want to benchmark themselves against a UK benchmark. But more importantly, and this perhaps goes back to Dr. Salmi's point earlier yesterday, they also want to benchmark themselves against a group of institutions that they see as their peers. So they've chosen 4 or 5 research-intensive universities who they can compare themselves against. So that's benchmarking in a particularly focused aspect, rather than just a global benchmarking, which is important, but also institutions that they see as their peers, or indeed institutions may want to emulate certain institutions. So you can choose the kind of comparison that you have. And then we've also begun work. Mahidol was our first partner in Thailand. So thank you very much for Mahidol to join the iGraduate family in terms of running the barometer. And we've got some comparisons here. I'm showing the glowing part of the report in terms of the postgraduate students. You can see the learning here for postgraduate students, high levels of satisfaction for Mahidol. And then Mahidol want to compare themselves with the global picture. They want to compare themselves with Asian institutions. And then they've also chosen some specific rivals or peers to compare themselves with. I think University of Oxford and are in these specific rivals. And then they can see the differences in terms of their comparisons. So it's a tool that they use, obviously, to enhance the provision by focusing on areas where they're not so good at, and also celebrate areas where they are strong. What we would like, of course, is to have a Thai comparison as well. So we need to get some more Thai institutions involved in the process. And I just want to touch on a new project that we've just begun with the University of Warwick. It's a tool developed by the University of Warwick, looking at the characteristics of an internationalized higher education institution. We talk about the rankings, and we talked about the rankings earlier, and the rankings again are just numerical targets which are easy to count. One would argue quite easy to manipulate in some cases. And you can see the comparisons there between the Times Higher Education, QS, and U Multirank. In terms of all of those items, obviously, majority of them are items that are raw counting items. But perhaps that's not enough. And I won't read the quote, you're capable of reading that yourselves. It's from the British Council. And obviously it's referring to the fact that diversity doesn't necessarily need to internationalization. You can have a diverse student body, you can have a diverse staff, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your institution itself is internationalized. And the reality is, of course, that the majority of students globally do not have an international experience. So it's important that we can include international students in both communities and classes so that domestic students can also get that international experience. So the University of Warwick have developed this sort of stage process, which many of you will be familiar with in terms of stages of internationalization, moving from a campus that is culturally homogenous, moving up to structural internationalization, where there's obviously more numbers in terms of diversity, in terms of students and in terms of staff, but limited intercultural interaction, integration, and personal growth, moving to a more high levels of intercultural interaction, and the ultimate goal is interculturally competent staff and students all interacting together. So what Warwick have developed is a tool that doesn't look at the composition, doesn't really count the numbers, but looks at students' perception of social integration, academic integration, communication skills, foreign language skills, and global graduate skills and the support that they are receiving. The measure itself looks at it in two ways. They first of all ask the students about the importance of those items, and then they refer to the actual experience that the students have. So hopefully it identifies students' aspirations for integration and for developing global graduate skills, and then looks at their actual experiences within the institution of those items, and then reveals the gap between the two, and hopefully will provide vital information for strategic planning for internationalization. It then yields 4 quadrants. So you can see at the bottom here's the importance to students, and then the actual student's experience. So obviously, you want the majority of items to be in that top right quadrant. So both it's important to students and also their experience is such that it's a flourishing institution in terms of those particular items. Becomes more worrying where it's important to students and their actual experience is very limited, so and sort of unfulfilling. From the initial research that Warwick have done, and we were the sort of partners in delivering the survey, of course the majority of students regard internationalization as important, or very important. But 50% of the students report that they're not experiencing those facets of internationalization. The facets of internationalization that are most important to them are global skills and support, social integration, and academic integration. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, domestic students attach noticeably lower levels of importance to those facets of internationalization than non-domestic students. And they also report lower levels of experience of the facets. And perhaps most interesting for this audience is that Asian students, compared with domestic and non-domestic European students, attach the greatest importance to the various facets of internationalization and show the largest gap between the internationalization experience which they aspire to and what they actually experience. So to conclude, some of the policy implications perhaps of that process is that I think greater attention needs to be paid to internationalization at home. Recruitment of international students is important, recruitment of international staff is important, and opportunities to study abroad, but they're not prerequisites in themselves, but it's insufficient in themselves. They're valuable prerequisites, excuse me, but are perhaps insufficient just by themselves. The greater support needs to be given to the nurturing of global graduate skills, which is both meet student expectations and also global employers, and that social and academic integration provides valuable opportunities for the development of global graduate skills. So I think steps need to be taken to foster these. And students, especially domestic students, show varying levels of commitment to social and academic integration, so that needs to be taken into account, that local students, domestic students need to see the value of having international staff, having international students. It's an important aspect of strategy. And both myself and Warwick would argue that this profiler is perhaps the only tool that moves beyond that structural benchmarking in terms of numbers to a more nuanced measure of opportunity and engagement with global skills growth. If you want some more information, feel free to drop me an email. You can see further reading at the bottom from the University of Warwick, their team that's developed that profile of measuring how internationalized the university is. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll move on to questions.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Dr. Nopraenue and also Guy, for sharing Mahidol experiences in doing the indicators for the internationalization. And I'm glad that they both said the word benchmarking, because when I'm hearing what Mahidol has done, and she was saying, oh, these indicators, she's not yet collected the numbers of the projects done with the social engagement on the international levels, and I can say that from my own experiences from our university, we did a lot of that, and we have that data as being collected as well. So I think benchmarking is a good exercise, and only we have this kind of sharing session. So I would like to open the floor for the questions, because I think we have about maybe 15 minutes for the questions. So if you have a question or comments. Yeah, okay. Okay. Darren, please.
Thank you very much, all. Very interesting, and there's a lot to dig into, I think, when we're looking at indicators. I just wonder, has the private sector or have employers been consulted on what their expectations are or what they see as valid in measuring in internationalization delivery in universities?
If anybody wants to share?
Well, at the institutional level, we do have the survey before we do the revision of each program. I mean, in order for us, Thai institutions, in order for us to launch any courses or programs, we have to come up with the employability survey. PI ค่ะใช่ไหมคะ the program revision, every time that we do the program revision, the employability survey is supposed to be done so that we know how to revise the program. But for international programs, I think, I'm not sure whether they are checking the needs in the internationalized facet or not. I'm not really sure about that.
If it is, I think it's based on the institution, but for example, Mahidol universities, and I think two ladies sitting over there, they are the one who are doing the survey. So basically, after the student graduates, they would send out the survey to the students in terms of employability and asking them whether or not they are engaging or working for international corporations or in international agencies. But then we also send out another survey to the employers, especially the international employers, and see whether they have got enough skills and knowledge from the program that we offered. I think you have to send, and okay, hang on a minute, please.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of certainly what Warwick have developed in terms of those global graduate skills come from, feedback from employers in terms of what they're looking for. And the items won't surprise you, whether it's, self-confidence, presentation skills, adaptability, language skills, etc. So those global graduate skills are built in from what employers are saying. And I think there are countless surveys on what employers are wanting from students. And, the mismatch sometimes between the output of the institution and what employers want is an issue, certainly.
I just have some observation from the last 2 days of the forum, and then I want to come up with some question for the panel here. So we have listened to kinds of experience and also best practices from different institutions and also from different authorities, national authorities. What I can see is that we are different stakeholders, different levels of internationalization, take different ideas and different approach to internationalization. For example, for some countries, it's about internationalization as the opportunity to send our students as for employability and also for national human resources. For some countries, it's about attracting more international students, also for our local national students to expose with intercultural experiences. And also, we talk about internationalization as regional cooperation and also harmonization, how every country, for good or for bad, less developed or more developed, kinds of catching up and be harmonized in the region and in the globe as a whole. But also we have been talking about internationalization as a tool for national competitiveness, as a nation building project. We also talk about internationalization as a kind of answer for market demand, from the industry demand, from the international pressure. But we also talk about the top-down policy pressure that universities from Southeast Asia, across Southeast Asia, taking it and kind of have to, either do or die. So since we are the last panel, I would like to ask for your opinion, for your experience that you draw from this two-day conference from different speeches and also from your own experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you really, summarized nicely the issues we have discussed last 2 days. And then I think there are, particularly in the context of Asia and the Pacific, we have such a diversity, amongst the higher education institutions and also higher education systems. And I don't think there would be, one fit for all size type of set of indicators we can come up in order to understand the situations relating to the internationalization of the higher education in this region. Even in one country, for instance, I was discussing with Professor Watabe about the indicators they have been working on. And then first they had more than 152 indicators, tried to narrow down to 53 and then so on, right? And then there's one indicator relating to the institutional networks. For those research universities or kind of the universities, if I may say, the kind of the layers or stratifications in the higher education systems. In the first tier, the universities in the first tier, they have a lot of international institutional networks across the borders. While the universities in the regions or smaller size of universities, they have very, very limited international institutional partners and networks. So we cannot simply apply which indicators means what to the universities. So they have to be very contextual in a sense to understand, to use these indicators to grasp what is actually happening here. But I also thought it's quite interesting to hear the presentation of the undergraduate that we often tend to focus more on the supply side. The universities, what sort of the indicators relating to. However, you have been looking at the demand side, how students actually perceive. And then this is an area probably we haven't done much yet to explore, because we've been focused much more on the supply side, but not really the demand side. That's, I think, the question to the private sector as well. We haven't heard much from the private sector, we haven't heard much from the students, and so on. So this complexity we really have to deal with, and then there are a lot to do. But at the same time, there has to be a certain small set of indicators commonly applied to understand what's going on as well. So we need to really understand what would be the core indicators and what would be the more specific or unique indicators depending on the context of the higher education institutions as well as higher education systems. So that's what I have been discussing with Libing and his colleagues, the necessity of having kind of the periodical report to understand, what's actually going on here. So that's kind of my response to your
Thank you.
statement.
I think internationalization is basically a mindset, actually, before it's been concretized into indicators. Internationalization means we need to always look outward, always looking for best practices, and always to be ready to align your practices with international best practices. I think this is more important than any other things. Once you have this kind of a culture of international referencing, if you have a kind of a culture of open-mindedness, then all the following things will be automatically happen, right? So it's more about people's mindset change, and then followed by concretization at the policy level and at the institutional level. What we are proposing is that don't narrowing internationalization to only students' mobility. It's, of course, it's the most important things, but also we need to think holistically. And internationalization, like gender, it's a lane. We see anything from gender's lane, we also see anything from international perspective, right? So this kind of things, and I saw increasingly a need for all the countries to introduce more international referencing process. What happened in other countries, and what will be the best practices, right? This kind of not isolating yourself, in your university and you think you are the best. Always sharing, but learning from others. This is basically the mentality of internationalization. Then we can divide it into different areas and the different functions of the universities. But this is what we are promoting, actually. Sometimes data is not important, of course, because once you have this mindset, then everything would be easier. Thank you.
Well, I totally agreed with the two speakers, and from the viewpoint of the international, well, from the viewpoint of the institution, I would repeat what I said earlier during my presentation, that it's a mix and match. So it really depends on your national system, whether it's top down or bottom up or something in between. It's also, well, it also depends on your vision, institutional vision and mission, and your mindset at the administrative level about internationalization, and then you translate it into implementation process to your whole community. So I think it's pretty much mix and match, and you're right that there is no one formula. And like Kitamura said, one size doesn't fit all.
So since I do the study institutional level internationalization, the focusing indicator, so which means institutions have a choice to define the internationalization itself. So even though I show that the regional differences among Oceania, Southeast Asia, and also East Asia, but I show the case of the Japan depends on the type of the institution, meaning of internationalization is different. Strategy is different, goal are different, indicator is different. So I feel institution has a responsibility to decide what it means. That's based on my study. Thank you.
Okay, I think, we have only 2 minutes left.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this indicator discussions. I'm from UNESCO Institute for Statistics. We are the one who collect the data on higher education, including higher education. And then we have a few indicators on higher education. And then definitely we have been a lot of problem in collecting those data. So especially at the country level, generating data, quality data. I'm not talking about just data, quality data. It's a challenge in all the countries. And then we have only few indicators, and then we are suffering in collecting those data, indicators. But I'm really appreciate like you have so many indicators you develop, and then you are start doing it. 53 indicators on higher education is a big indicators, a lot of indicators, I think. So that way, I really appreciate your effort. One of the things that I was looking at over here is like right now I see the internationalization, the data collection, all sort of things you are talking about in the institution level. So I see this is more about self-evaluation type of things. So to understand yourself, where we are standing in terms of internationalization in the institution level. So, but I'm thinking like whether we can also do it at national level, or you have planned to do it. Maybe there are some outstanding universities or institutions, they do it, and they show it like how they are doing. But there might be many universities, they are not doing these kind of things. Then we cannot understand what is actually happening in the country level, at the national level. So maybe, I don't know, you have planned to do it, whether we can expand this one to do at national level. So that way we can understand, in terms of national level, are we progressing towards internationalization? So it's the monitoring. When we talk about monitoring, it's not only just to see like where we are standing. Definitely we need to see where we are moving or not moving.
Okay.
So that kind of things we might see. So do you have any plan for doing at national level?
Yeah. Okay, Professor Kitamura.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Thank you for the question. I know that UIS is working on collecting data from the countries, right? But what I also see is that the indicator is not enough for higher education. That's why we would like to develop more indicators to measure internationalization of higher education. I think the entry point of data collection is very important. I saw so many cases where government is manipulating data without showing us how do they collect the data from. I think this is a kind of mechanism which need to be transparent and also, how can I say, the process is monitored and to prevent any manipulation of data, right? And also, once public data was produced, it's at a national level, should also be supported by small sampling data collected from small sampling. I don't think sometimes national level data is meant as any meaning. I mean, it's just, didn't see anything actually. So normally big data, national data should be supported by small sampling to make a good example of this, right? So this is more convincing, I think. For our project, I think we would start with some pilot universities. We are asking for their letter of confirmation to say that they are going to open their data for the purpose of this project. And also at the national level, we are going to engage ministry officials in charge of higher education data collection. We are engaging the right person to come to share their indicators, existing indicators, and then to try to see if we can come up with a common indicators. So this is more sustainable when it comes to data. Basically, data is useless if there's no, it cannot tell anything, right? Or if it's not a real or very valid data. So yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, may I elaborate? I mean, I agree with Libing, and one of the reasons, I mean, I fully agree with you that we need to work more on the national level data. I mean, that's one of the probably the reasons why much of the data available at the national level is really focusing on only the mobility, for instance, number of students, or because that's kind of easier to collect. However, even in terms of the number of students, we need to interpret what this actually implies. And for instance, in case of Japan, we are trying to increase the number of international students. However, if you look at the institutional level, I said that I hate to say first year, second year, third year, but just the practical manner, let me use the word like that. The first year, universities in the first year, like research universities, I mean, or more elite type of universities, they are willing to increase the number of international students because of for the academic excellence. I mean, you want to get all the good students. While the universities in the kind of the more mass level, they are facing the decrease of the young population, and then they like to supply, I mean, they like to accommodate the seat. I mean, they like to fill the seats of the university by accommodating the international students. So even the increase of the number of international students means different across the different types of universities. But that doesn't mean we need to only look at the institutional level, but actually we have to combine the national level data and the institutional level data. And we can probably categorize the institutions in order to interpret what actually this national level data means. So this kind of efforts, I'm hoping we can make, I mean, when we try to develop more national level data, but that has to be derived kind of from the institutional level in order to concretely interpret. I hope I'm clear enough. Thank you.
Okay, I think we are running out of time. I'm sorry about that. But I think what we can take away from this session is that on this institutional levels, you can see the example of Mahidol University, and you can pick and choose the indicators. I think it's all in the making. And I think to link back to Dr. Jamil Sami yesterday's analogy of different kinds of cars you are. So you are not supposed to, if you are like an antique car, you shouldn't have the indicators of the supercar, so to speak. So the indicators that fits you, that should be you who actually know. But I think it's good as well to have the benchmarking with the correct types of car that you are. I think that's one that you can take away. Second, because you are cars, so there are common indicators. But I think that is also in the making. So we are hoping that, these common indicators is helping us to actually grow. And please do not forget, but at the end of the day, the internationalization for your own institution should, match with your strategy and the vision. So with that, thank you very much, all the panelists. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, the moderator and guest speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please be informed of the program adjustment. Please be informed of the program adjustment. We will continue with the last session and end with coffee break. And kindly accept my sincere apologies for this final change. Kindly